The war in Iran may be thousands of miles away, but the effect of it is felt all over the country, including here in New England.
We've seen gas prices fluctuate over the years, but a 30% gain in a week is the biggest gain we've seen in 4 decades, according to AAA.
I drive an hour back and forth to work, so this is terrible right now.
Not much we can do here, you know. We see how slow it's filling up, but hitting where it hurts, in the pockets.
My Republican friends came here constantly to say, oh, but the debt, oh, but the debt, oh, but the debt. But if you take a look at where things are going, in Trump's first term, they added $8 trillion to the debt. And the recent billionaires bill, this one right here, is north of $4 trillion, $5.5 trillion if made permanent.
Tonight's story begins inside a Senate Budget Committee hearing. But it's really about something much bigger. Who gets blamed when the cost of governing, the cost of war, and the cost of energy all hit American households at the same time? Senator Sheldon Whitehouse came into that hearing arguing Republicans have no credibility on debt after the Trump era added trillions, and that the latest tax agenda could pile on even more. Then he pivoted, hard, to energy, accusing the administration of pushing policies that raise prices for ordinary consumers while protecting fossil fuel interests. But this is where the story gets more politically combustible. Whitehouse is tying together 3 volatile issues: deficits, the Iran war, and electricity prices. And if even part of that argument lands with voters, this stops being a committee room clash and becomes a kitchen table political problem.
Things are going. In Trump's first term, they added $8 trillion to the debt.
That is the core charge. Whitehouse is saying the people who spent years invoking debt as a warning sign are now advancing policies that deepen it. Some of his language is partisan. He calls it a billionaire's bill and a tax scam, but the underlying fiscal fight is real. The official Democratic summary of a CBO estimate said extending Trump tax cuts for another decade would add $4.6 trillion to the deficit. A separate Penn-Wharton budget model analysis estimated a roughly $4 trillion increase in primary deficits over 10 years if the expiring provisions were made permanent. Now, that does not automatically validate every White House talking point, but it does explain why debt politics is such a minefield here. One side says it is preventing tax hikes and fueling growth. The other says it is using reconciliation rules to lock in massive deficit increases while still lecturing everyone else about fiscal discipline.
So I want to talk a little bit about deficits and debt, because when I chaired this committee and I had hearings into what climate-driven extreme weather portends for insurance, mortgage, and real estate markets, my Republican friends came here constantly to say, oh, but the debt, oh, but the debt, oh, but the debt. But if you take a look at where things are going, in Trump's first term, they added $8 trillion to the debt. And the recent billionaires bill, this one right here, is north of $4 trillion, $5.5 trillion if made permanent. And the role of this committee in making things worse, not better, on the debt is part of the problem. The tax scam bill, as we refer to it on our side, that the Republicans put through for their rich friends in the first Trump administration was $2 trillion of that, and that had to come through this committee to get to reconciliation, to be able to push those rich people's tax cuts on a party line basis. This $4 trillion had to come through this committee to get to reconciliation, and if it's made permanent, then it's going to be another $1 trillion. So we cannot pretend that the Budget Committee is a great place for solving the debt problem right now.
Then Whitehouse broadens the frame. He is no longer just talking about deficits as an abstract Washington number. He is arguing that budget choices and energy choices are connected, and that the real price is being paid outside the Capitol, at gas stations and on monthly utility bills. This is where the hearing gets much more dangerous politically, because voters can ignore a $1 trillion argument. They cannot ignore a bill they open every month, and Whitehouse chooses his next line carefully. He ties rising energy costs to the Iran war, then says electricity is also getting more expensive because cheap, clean power is being kept off the grid. Whether you agree with him or not, that is a sharp populist argument that families are being squeezed from both directions while political donors and energy interests keep winning.
It's been just 1 month since the United States military began Operation Epic Fury, targeting the world's #1 state sponsor of terror, Iran. In these past 4 weeks, our armed forces have delivered swift, decisive, overwhelming victories on the battlefield. Victories like few people have ever seen before. Tonight, Iran's Navy is gone. Their Air Force is in ruins. Their leaders, most of them terrorist regime they led, are now dead. Their command and control of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is being decimated as we speak. Their ability to launch missiles and drones is dramatically curtailed, and their weapons, factories, and rocket launchers are being blown to pieces. Very few of them left. Never in the history of warfare has an enemy suffered such clear and devastating large-scale losses in a matter of weeks. Our enemies are losing, and America, as it has been for 5 years under my presidency, is winning, and now winning bigger than ever before. Before discussing this current situation, I also want to thank our troops for the masterful job they did in taking the country of Venezuela in a matter of minutes. That hit was quick, lethal, violent, and respected by everyone all over the world. After rebuilding our military during my first term, we have by far the strongest military anywhere in the world. And now we're working along with Venezuela and are, in a true sense, joint venture partners. We're getting along incredibly well in the production and sale of massive amounts of oil and gas, the second largest reserves on Earth after the United States of America. We're now totally independent of the Middle East, and yet we are there to help. We don't have to be there. We don't need their oil. We don't need anything they have, but we're there to help our allies. Tonight, I want to provide an update on the tremendous progress our warriors have made in Iran and discuss why Operation Epic Fury is necessary for the safety of America and the security of the free world. From the very first day I announced my campaign for president in 2015, I have vowed that I would never allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. This fanatical regime has been chanting death to America, death to Israel for 47 years. Their proxies were behind the murder of 241 Americans in the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut, the slaughter of hundreds of our service members with roadside bombs. They were involved in the attack on the USS Cole, and they carried out the countless other heinous acts, including the just horrible, bloody atrocities of October 7th in Israel, something that most people have never seen anything like it. This murderous regime also recently killed 45,000 of their own people who were protesting in Iran. 45,000 dead. For these terrorists to have nuclear weapons would be an intolerable threat. The most violent and thuggish regime on earth would be free to carry out their campaigns of terror, coercion, conquest, and mass murder from behind a nuclear shield. I will never let that happen, and neither should any of our past presidents. This situation has been going on for 47 years and should have been handled long before I arrived in office. I did many things during my 2 terms in office to stop the quest for nuclear weapons by Iran first, and perhaps most importantly, I killed General Qasem Soleimani in my first term. He was an evil genius, brilliant person, a horrible human being, however, the father of the roadside bomb, and he lived just horrible what he did. Iran would have been perhaps in far better, stronger position. Had he lived, we would have had probably a different conversation tonight. But you know what? We'd still be winning and winning big. And then, very importantly, I terminated Barack Hussein Obama's Iran nuclear deal, a disaster. Obama gave them $1.7 billion in cash, green cash. Took it out of banks from Virginia, D.C., and Maryland, all the cash they had. He flew it by airplanes in an attempt to buy their respect and loyalty, but it didn't work. They laughed at our president and went on with their mission to have a nuclear bomb. His Iran deal would have led to a colossal arsenal of massive nuclear weapons for Iran, and they would have had them years ago, and they would have used them. It would have been a different world. There would have been no Middle East and no Israel right now, in my opinion, the opinion of a lot of great experts, had I not terminated that terrible deal. And I was so honored to do it. I was so proud to do it. It was so bad right from the beginning. Essentially, I did what no other president was willing to do. They made mistakes, and I am correcting them. My first preference was always the path of diplomacy, yet the regime continued their relentless quest for nuclear weapons and rejected every attempt at an agreement. For this reason, in June, I ordered a strike on Iran's key nuclear facilities, an Operation Midnight Hammer. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. Those beautiful B-2 bombers performed magnificently. We totally obliterated those nuclear sites. The regime then sought to rebuild their nuclear program at a totally different location, making clear they had no intention of abandoning their pursuit of nuclear weapons. They were also rapidly building a vast stockpile of conventional ballistic missiles and would soon have had missiles that could reach the American homeland, Europe, and virtually any other place on Earth. Iran's strategy was so obvious. They wanted to produce as many missiles as possible, and they did, with the longest range possible. And they had some weapons that nobody believed they had. We just learned that out. We took them out. We took them all out so that no one would really dare stop them. And their race for a nuclear bomb, a nuclear weapon like nobody's ever seen before. They were right at the doorstep. For years, everyone has said that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons, but in the end, those are just words if you're not willing to take action when the time comes. As I stated in my announcement of Operation Epic Fury, our objectives are very simple and clear. We are systematically dismantling the regime's ability to threaten America or project power outside of their borders. That means eliminating Iran's Navy, which is now absolutely destroyed, hurting their Air Force and their missile program at levels never seen before, and annihilating their defense industrial base. We've done all of it. Their Navy is gone, their Air Force is gone, their missiles are just about used up or beaten. Taken together, these actions will cripple Iran military, crush their ability to support terrorist proxies, and deny them the ability to build a nuclear bomb.
This is the context Whitehouse is trying to exploit. A White House projecting military strength abroad, while lawmakers at home still do not know what the bill will be. That uncertainty matters because wars do not just have battlefield consequences. They can reverberate into shipping routes, oil markets, insurance costs, and public spending. And in Rhode Island, Whitehouse had a local data point ready. He said regular gasoline had crossed $4, premium crossed $5, and diesel was nearing $6. Local reporting from WPRI, citing AAA Northeast, confirmed Rhode Island's average gas price climbed to $4.01 per gallon on April 7th, the first time it had crossed that line since 2022, with the report explicitly linking higher prices to the conflict with Iran.
The national average for a gallon of gas is higher than $4. This is the highest in nearly 4 years, higher than any point during the president's 2 terms. West Texas crude oil prices, the U.S. benchmark, they settle at their highest point in 4 years, and you can see they're actually up from what they closed at last night, which I said was pretty high already.
I'll give you a little example. If you want to know that clean energy is inexpensive, just go to your grid operator and ask them what the generation stack looks like. And what they will tell you is that they deploy clean energy first because it's less expensive. Grids run less expensive power first, irrespective of how it's fueled. And they run clean energy first because it's less expensive. Then, on top of that, they've got fossil fuel energy. And what happens at any given level of demand, let's say this, if you have taken the clean energy out of the grid, now for that same level of demand, you're running way more fossil fuel energy. And what you've done is you've taken units at the top that wouldn't be running, units above my finger, let's say that's where the demand is, units above my finger that would not be running, now they run. They run because the clean energy isn't there. And when they run, they set the price for the grid. And when they set the price for the grid, they raise costs for consumers because almost always the most expensive unit running is the one that sets the grid price. And that grid price goes to Americans' electric utility bills.
This is the most substantive part of Whitehouse's argument, and it deserves to be translated into plain English. He is describing a common feature of wholesale electricity markets. The marginal unit often sets the clearing price. In other words, if demand is high enough that more expensive plants have to come online, those higher-cost plants can influence what everyone pays. Whitehouse's claim is that if you block cheaper clean generation, you force the grid to lean harder on costlier fossil units, and that pushes consumer bills up. Now, his critics will say that is too simple. Grid pricing depends on transmission, demand peaks, weather, fuel constraints, and market rules. But Whitehouse is not arguing theory in a vacuum. He points to a regional example. Offshore wind priced well below prevailing regional electricity levels. And supporters of that project say it offers long-term price stability, precisely because it is not exposed in the same way to volatile global fuel markets.
The Revolution Wind Project has begun delivering power to New England's electric grid. The offshore wind energy farm is expected to supply enough electricity to power more than 350,000 homes and businesses once it's all up and running. Governor Dan McKee releasing a statement that reads in part, quote, "Offshore wind is part of our state's all-of-the-above energy strategy, one that strengthens our energy supply and supports long-term reliability for residents and businesses." Now, this comes after the Trump administration halted work on 4 offshore wind projects earlier this year, citing national security concerns. A judge later ruled work could resume on Revolution Wind.
Trump administration has halted work on Revolution Wind, the offshore wind farm being built off the coast of Rhode Island. The order from the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management was issued today to stop work on that project, which was set to power 350,000 homes in the Ocean State and Connecticut. Denmark-based energy company Ørsted released a statement saying the project is already 80% complete and Revolution Wind is fully permitted, adding in part, quote, "Ørsted is evaluating all options to resolve the matter expeditiously, with the aim being to proceed with continued project construction towards commercial operation date in the second half of 2026.
First at 4, Revolution Wind is now up and running. The state's offshore wind project is nearly complete. In fact, it is already delivering power to southern New England. Luke Hydash covers New London County, and he is your reporter live in New London to explain what this means for the price of electricity. Luke?
Well, Kara, state leaders say that this project should help lower the cost of electricity in our state, especially when we have harsh winters like the one we're coming out of now. Work on Revolution Wind is now more than 90% finished. 65 turbines, 32 miles off the coast of Connecticut. Work is expected to be all done in a few months. And at that point, the project will power 350,000 homes in Connecticut and Rhode Island, increasing energy supply by 2.5%. This milestone comes after 2 stop work orders by the federal government. National security concerns were overruled and work continued. State leaders expect less costly, more reliable energy, which could trickle down to Connecticut ratepayers.
If it had been prevented from coming online, we know that energy costs for New England would be higher by about $500 million annually.
It's the price of gas, it's the price of oil, probably 5 or 6 times we're paying for this wind power. So people say, oh boy, wind's expensive. You ought to see what it costs without wind power.
Well, on the other side of the ferry over there is State Pier, and there are some components of wind turbines still there. They're not for Revolution Wind. We talk about the next project coming out of New London ahead in our news at 5 o'clock.
This is where the video should widen back out. Whitehouse is making a classic political inversion. He is telling viewers that the loudest voices warning about debt are also backing policies that, in his telling, make debt worse, and then, on top of that, make energy more expensive. The power of that message is not in whether every number is airtight. The power is in the pattern he wants viewers to see. Tax cuts tilted upward, war costs still fuzzy, cheap energy blocked, families left with the bill. But a serious report also has to show the other side. Russell Vought and Republicans reject the framing entirely. They argue Democrats were less outraged when gas prices were high in 2022, defend fossil fuel production as essential to affordability and growth, and cast green energy first politics as ideological and unreliable.
Well, I don't recall this level of outrage when gasoline prices nationwide averaged $5 a gallon in June of 2022 because of the Democrat war on fossil fuels. I don't understand or don't hear the outrage of the incredibly high energy prices in California that probably hews closest to the type of policies they want to promote in terms of energy.
Well, let me remind you.
The good news is,
as long as you're going to debate with me, you might as well allow me to answer.
The good news is we're actually utilizing God-given energy resources here in America. We are energy independent. We are the largest producer now of fossil fuels for energy. If you want a good economy, you need power. The cheaper the power, the better. And green energy hasn't.
As long as you're going to interrupt and challenge what I have said, I at least deserve the courtesy to reply. And I will tell you that there was considerable outrage when fossil fuel prices soared in the past. And in fact, I wrote an excess profits clawback bill because the fossil fuel industry took the biggest profits in world history, taking advantage of the Ukraine war to raise prices on American consumers, even for $1 of gas that never went anywhere near Ukraine.
What made this hearing matter was not the shouting. It was the collision of two competing stories about the American economy. One story says deficits are being driven higher by tax policy that protects the wealthy, while war spending and blocked clean energy leave consumers exposed. The other says America needs more conventional power, more military strength, and less faith in climate-first economics. And that is the real takeaway. This was not just a spat over one budget hearing. It was a preview of the argument both parties are going to make to the country. When your bills rise, whose policies should you blame? Whitehouse gave one answer, Vought gave another. The numbers on debt, war funding, gas prices, and power costs are now the battlefield where that fight will be decided.